Hi there. It's Ray Bagdwell. This is on queer.net, and we are talking tonight about what's really on our minds, or what do I really think? Um, Maybe tell it like it is. There's a lot of things about being gay, and one of them is not about being quiet. We have to speak for ourselves because, if we don't, who's going to speak for us? But it also means we have to be engaged in what's going on around us, and there's a lot going on around us. So I thought tonight I'd just spend a little time going through some of the things that are happening, make some commentary, see how they might connect with the fact that we're queer people. They all connect, because as a queer person, we are also an important part of the decisions in this country and the way that we frame our responses and the people we elect. And we have elections coming up. So let's get to it. I'm using Apple News just because it's easy for me to scroll through. So I'm going to go through the first story here. We're looking at the flooding that's taking place in Puerto Rico, which is just, oh gosh, it's so hard down there. I mean, there's a lot of people down there, part of our community, just part of the whole community of Puerto Rico. Many friends there, a wonderful island, and this hurricane is barreling on them with huge amounts of rain. It was 5 years ago. They went through Maria, and the power is out again. They say it's not going to be as bad, but please keep them in your thoughts, okay? Um, that's probably the first thing to pay attention to, the terrible suffering that's going on in some of these places, and not to avoid it. So we got natural disasters, and they affect us too. So the people that we elect, who are open and welcoming and affirming to people in our community, also have to be good leaders, right? Um, then there's crazy stuff with the Republicans. I'm looking at Republicans in key battleground races refuse to say they will accept the results. I don't know what they're doing, um, except practicing a form of cruelty to play to a very unhappy base. Now, I have this sort of theory, you see, that we've been going through grieving for a long time in this nation. Inequality produces that, racism produces that. And then the time of pandemic, really, we have suffered so much loss and so much change in who we are and the way we live our lives. It's been enormous. And you need to be able to recover from that stuff, right? You need to be able to heal from it, and that takes time. But we're not really good as a nation, let alone as a community or even a neighborhood, at helping one another to heal. There's been so many things, and we've fallen into such a place of needing just to protect ourselves and our families and fight for our rights all the time. And then somebody's trying to take them away. And, I come to you and say, why don't we think about how we can help to heal? It's not that we don't want to do it, it's when, how, right? And so, as a result of this inability to learn how to heal together, and then the other things that are going on that just make it all much more difficult, these these absences of time to help with our grieving have turned that grieving into grievances even more. And so that's what's playing out, I think. It's this innate anger that is coming out of hurting so much. Now, some of the hurt, you know what, we all are responsible for one way or the other. This country has an incredible um, stigma deep in its soul in terms of racism, bigotry, homophobia, xenophobia, all of those things. So we have a part in that, but we've been working hard to change that, right? So many of us and our allies have been working hard to change life for the queer people in this country, and now in this whole lump of grievances, let's go after the queer people. Let's go after same gender marriage. Let's go after women's rights. Let's go after everything. Let's get it back to the way it was in 19 whatever. Can't go there. Can't go there. And I don't know that we can convince the people who think that's the right direction to go. For whatever reason, they think that. And the only way to do it, at least the initial way to do it, is make sure we have people in office representing us and those we love and those who are of good mind and good spirit and compassionate hearts and care about one another, regardless of any denomination or theology that you embrace. I always like to say to people, I know there's a God because I've seen a sunrise and a sunset, and I mean that. However you know that, God, we have to elect people. We have to put people in office. We have to hire people in our businesses, in our churches, in all of the forms of community leadership, coaches. I sat here at home last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, and there was Little League practice across the street. And my windows were open and the doors open. I hear everything. Okay, that's great. Kids are playing. The ball's being belted off of these metal bats now, which make even more noise. And I hear this coach going, "Run like a man, Alexander." And I was like, what? I was ready to go over there. If he had said it again, I would have. Point is, whoever we hire, we have to be real careful so that they're not these people that are going in and culling books out of libraries and people that are, wanting to take away the rights of anyone who's different than they are. I go over to Cherry Grove a lot, right? And not as much as I'd like to. It's a wonderful community. It's in Fire Island. It's on the southern shore of Long Island, which extends from New York City in New York. And Fire Island is a barrier reef, basically. And it's been a community for queer people for many, many, many years. And I watch, not all day trippers, but I watch straight people come over for their bachelorette parties, for their bachelor parties, for just getting drunk because they go to our community because they figure they can do whatever they want. And those people, so many times, I think are over there for a little bit more than just a drink or two. And then they'll come back on this side and they'll put on their conservative, anti-queer, anti-women, anti-whatever, and go about their life because their whatever doesn't smell. Sometimes you cover up, looks like a cat in a litter box. You cover up what you've done and everything looks good on the surface. So we really have to make sure that the people we hire, all that us to say, we have to make sure that all the people we hire, wherever they are, and especially those who come in contact with kids are not people telling them to run like a man, or you're going to hell if you're queer, or stay away from that, and all those names they use to describe us from time to time. It's really important. And so we're responsible for that, I think. And then, you look down a little bit further, you've got the Putin's war, as many of us call it. There is just something that is so totally unconscionable. Whatever the reasons, those folks in Russia think they're right, whatever it is. The news is just really starting to get into Russia now. The reality of what's been taking place in Ukraine is slowly creeping back into the public eye in Russia. And they're starting to realize that this is one person's ego leading a system that has been so corrupted over the years that there's no training for military, there's no supplies because they get stolen and sold along the way by everyone from a foot soldier to the generals. It is such a system that is based on corruption, greed, power, self-aggrandizement, and control. And we know that if you're a queer person there, you're liable to end up in some archipelago somewhere and, spending years of your life there if they so choose to do that. So having compassion for the people in the Ukraine and for other places around the country where these atrocities are, around the world, thank you, where these atrocities are taking place is also part of, as a community, we're part of that. I mean, we bring our energy to that. And then we got, I don't know, the winged xenophobes, these governors fly. I mean, do you remember going back? I talked about this in church today. Do you remember going back? Now, our immigration system is busted. It has to be fixed. And one of the reasons it's so broken is because we do not know how to work together in Congress and put the good of the people ahead of our own self-interests in so many cases. That drive to get elected, I don't have it. I don't have it. I'm not in politics, so I don't have this drive to get elected at all costs. But boy, it sure seems to exist in the hearts and minds of so many people, and they will do anything and say anything. I mean, just look at them. Look at the way they change what they say from one day to another, just to get a vote or two or to beat their chests, even at the expense of others. So you remember this immigration system that is broken, and within that system, there has long been provisions for uh, immigrants coming across the boundaries of our nation, come across the borders without illegally crossing the borders, for them to be separated from their families under certain conditions. It's a horrible thing. I don't care what the conditions are, unless there's abuse or mistreatment or something of that sort. Um, well, during the Trump administration, what was initiated was zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. That's it. You come across the border illegally, split them, the kids and the families, just you split them apart. Just split them. And it wasn't until at one point, if you might remember, out of one of the detention centers, somebody smuggled out a recording of the wailing of a child, just screaming and "Mama," being separated from her child, and that really struck a chord, as some of these stories do. And so there was a response to that didn't fix the immigration system, but it started to turn it around, where this zero tolerance thing was getting so, it was such a shame on our nation. It was so embarrassing. It was whether to get votes because the public was turning against them or because they had a change of heart. The regret was so strong that even the politicians started to say, we can't keep doing this. And the administration modified that. And in the last few years, since the new administration came in, we've been trying to get those families reunited. And out of the 5,000 or so that were separated, we don't know because the records weren't kept with the intention of ever reuniting them. We still have, we think, 500 to 800 families that have not been united. So why would you do this? You do it because you want to be so cruel that nobody would even think of crossing the border and be subjugated to that type of treatment. And this seems to be a strategy: cruelty at all costs, to deter and to gain power, to push people away, to keep you or me even from speaking up, right? Politicians from running, and we have a say in that. I mean, how many people have been cruel to the queer community and still are? We all must know that. If you don't, you are so fortunate. But there are still people being separated from their families because they're gay. There are still people that are being discriminated against, and people that are just dying to discriminate against us, including those on the Supreme Court. A few of them would just really like to turn all of this stuff around on us again, so that we're pushed back into the closet, out of sight, quieted. It ain't going to happen. Nope. So these elections, that keeps coming back to elections, doesn't it? Yeah. Um, this one I don't get. Why men are undergoing an expensive and painful surgery to lengthen their legs. I'm going to have to look more on that. I'll let you know about that one. I don't think I'd have to get all new clothes. I'm not going to do that. So there's a lot going on, and it's, if we look, so here, when I worked in New York City at Jan Hus Presbyterian Church and Neighborhood House, we served um, over 20,000 people living in homeless conditions a year, who fell through all of the other cracks of the system. We had, at one point, we redistributed mail for 600 people that had no way to receive their mail. If you're living on the streets, or if you don't have a permanent address, how do you get your mail? If you don't have enough money to buy food or to buy your medicines or whatever it might be, to pay the rent when you can get a place to stay, how can you afford to put money into a post office box? And how do you know even where you're going to be and what post office? So all of those complications, places like Jan Hus and others would uh, legally get the mail signed over to be delivered to our location, and then we'd keep track of it, we'd file it, and people would come in and say, may I have my mail, and we'd redistribute it. And so we did everything we could to help people with just simple things like getting a driver's license or getting an ID. If you get a driver's license, getting an ID. How do you apply for something? Helping people to do their resumes, helping people to, okay, here's what you do when you go for a job interview. We had the soup kitchen and the food pantry, and we had a clothing place, and the place was just a hubbub of the spirit, I like to think, of 52 12-step meetings a week. A week! Um, and we were a small congregation. I always kid around that when I got there, I was there 3.5 years as a temporary stated supply pastor because you see, back then, even though I was out and gay, queer pastors still weren't getting those positions that were permanent and installed. So we got temporary positions, which were important. But it was the mistreatment is still there to a degree. But I have to tell you, when I started there, within the 3 years, by the time I left, I had increased the membership rolls 150%. Yep, how's that? When I got there, there were 9 people. When I left, there were 12 members. But we had like 500 people a day going through the building, maybe more. Youth groups, children's school, preschool, this group, that group. And, so who are our members? All of those people, I think, are our members. And if you live life and if you work in a place where you're engaged with people who are living on the edge, you get closer to the edge, right? And that means that you see more. You see the atrocities and the need and the struggling and the pain and the sorrow that people go through. And it can be discouraging because you see so much. So how do you say the little, quote unquote, that we do is important in the face of the enormity that needs to be done? It takes practice, and it really has to do with taking a look at the way that we interact with one another so that our interactions are interactions, not transactions, where there's conversations. How you doing as you hand them a pair of socks? Understanding that the social cues that we take for granted, that many of us are relearning after 2 years of being out of close contact with one another, those people who live on the street don't have that opportunity. So they may not be able to say, oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for asking. It's so nice of you to consider me and helping us. They may say nothing at all. But it's sort of like that. The fact that we attempt, the fact that we're there with what we have, the fact that we are doing what we can. If everybody does what they can, right? We'd be in much better shape. So this idea of engaging ourselves in the community, in the society, and looking at the news not as, oh my God, that's horrible, and there's nothing we can do about it, it's just so overwhelming. What we do matters. And as I said today in church as well, if there's families in Ukraine that need food, or let's use that as an example. So there's a shortage of food. If we could, how many of us would get on a plane or join an organization and go over there and work to help that for the people there? A lot of us might, or at least think we would like to do something like that. But it's so unrealistic. But to think that unless we did that, we can't make a contribution, that's what folks who contribute to the dark side want from us. They want us to take this negative energy and to add it to the difficulties and the challenges so that we feel neutered, immobilized, impotent, and give up and just let them run the world the way we want. So maybe we write a check to one of the organizations, $5, $10, what we can afford, that's working over there, and they're doing their part. But there's a food pantry down the block, right? So if we take some food from our cupboard, as I did this morning, I just took stuff in my cupboard that I had bought. I didn't get a chance to go to the store. I'll go to the store tomorrow. And I brought in a few items. You know what? I fed people here. So if I feed people here, and they feed people there, and they feed, that's how it works. Is it going to change things overnight? No. But what we can do changes a person's life for a day, maybe. Putting some food on a table, for example, giving somebody a warm winter garment as it gets cold. One person. For that day, their life was changed in some way that's meaningful. And that's why looking at what we do and what we can do, even in the smallest of ways, can be very rewarding in the sense of fighting back on this sort of darkness that sometimes feels like it's surrounding us with what we were referring to today as, the song Amazing Grace. Well, we made sort of a tag on that at the end of worship today, and we said, be the amazing grace. We are amazing grace. Be amazing to others and to ourselves. See the amazing grace in ourselves and then find ways to give it and share it with others. As you can tell, nothing here is scripted. I think it's coherent. You will decide that. I will say this, though, that the idea of voting, we're coming up on that, and it's really important. Oh my gosh, it's really important. It is so important that I say that. So please, 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 everyone you talk to, help them to vote. We're going to make sure people get registered if they're not, if they need a ride to get their votes, whatever we do, We are the people who make the decisions about who and what are going to lead this country and how we are going to be. Amazing grace or a shame and disappointment to those who haven't lost the compassion in the heart that is etched into the base of the Statue of Liberty in so many different ways. So, well, there you go. Sunday night, a little bit of a chat. Um, just talking about what's on my mind. I really appreciate you if you're watching part of this or all of this, and I'd love to hear your comments. I'm not sure what to do with this, but we'll see how it goes, and you will let me know. So, there you go. Be well. Hope to see you soon. Remember you are loved. Remember you are beautiful. Remember you have every right to be who you are and where you are. And don't let anyone tell you differently. And if they give you a hard time, give them my number. I'll tell them. Y'all take care now. Peace. See you next time.